Welcome one and all. My name is Chris, and I will be your digital tech trainer for this tutorial video. Today's topic is file extensions. We'll be going over 6 main points. What is a file extension? How to show file extensions in Windows, changing default associations, malware and file extension tricks, how to open a file with different programs, and lists of common file extensions and what they are used for. Let's start with what is a file extension. A file extension, sometimes called a file suffix, a file name extension, or simply an extension, is the identifier suffix at the end of a computer file name that indicates what type of file it is. The extension essentially indicates a characteristic of the file's contents, or its intended use. Thus, if the extension allows the operating system to know what type of file it is, it can then choose an appropriate program, or suggest programs, to run when you double-click on the file to open it. It is able to do this because each operating system has in its configuration a default mapping between a particular file extension and a particular program. For example, in the file name new text document.txt, the txt is the file extension. It indicates the file is a text document and should open in a word processor like Notepad or WordPad. A file name extension is typically set apart from the file name with a period or full stop, and is usually 3 or 4 characters long, typically letters or digits, but in some operating systems, it is separated with spaces. A file name can have no extensions, a single extension, or more than one extension. More than one extension usually represents nested transformations, such as in the case files.tar.gz. The .tar indicates that the file is a tar archive of one or more files, and the .gz indicates the tar archive file is compressed with gzip. In the case of Windows operating systems, file extensions can often be hidden from users. File extensions can be renamed. However, simply renaming a file extension does not necessarily convert one file format to another. Let's briefly take a moment to see how to show file extensions in Windows so you can find these types of files for yourself. The quickest way to turn on viewing file extensions for documents is to open a new window where you can view files. Go to the View menu option, and over on the right, click the checkbox labeled File Name Extensions. You may also want to check Hidden Items. That way you can see any hidden folders. Notice how each of these documents now has the file extension following the name. It is also worth noting that folders do not have a file extension. Another trick is to change the view from icons to details. Here, you can also see what the computer is suggesting the type of file is. Next, we'll look at how to change default file associations. There may come a time that you wish to change a default file association, so that you can use a different program to automatically open the file. For example, when you open an image file on Windows, it defaults to using the pre-installed Windows Photo Viewer. In the future, if you find a new program that you would like to use instead, you can change the associations for image files so that they instead are opened by this new program. Here we have the image of a cute little bunny. If I double-click on this image, you can see that it opens in Windows Photo Viewer. Let's change the default file association so that this little bunny opens in Paint instead. To do so, we need to go down to the Start menu, right-click, and click on Settings. Choose Apps from the menu, and then click on Default Apps over on the left. Here you can see the default programs for each of the different services: email, maps, music player, photo viewer, etc. We want to change Windows Photo Viewer. I simply click on the listing of the program and select a new one, such as Paint. Now, anytime I open a JPEG file picture, it'll open in Paint instead. Before we go any further, let's get serious and talk about security, namely malware and file extension tricks. A common trick that malware developers will use to trick you into running a computer infection is to send an email attachment that has a file name that contains 2 periods in it, or appears to have 2 file extensions. Here in the 2 photos, we have 2 examples of malware disguised as .wav audio files. An example of this type of file is salesreport.xls.exe. As you can see, the file has an exe extension on it, which means it is an executable. What is an executable, you ask? Well, that is how someone first starts a program, like say the install for a virus. Other common malware email attachments might use other executable file extensions like .msi, .a6p, .app or .applescript for Apple users, .bat, or .cgi. Malware is also often embedded in archived or compressed files as well. Be on the lookout for suspicious .zip, .rar, or .ace file extensions too. Some of these can auto-extract and run when opened, hence installing malware as well. Regardless of the file extensions you receive via email, it is always a good idea to be wary of phishing scams and files sent to you by other users, even people you know from your own contacts lists. Ask before you open if they indeed sent you the file in question. If the file comes from a business, government agency, or any other entity, call them. It is always best to get confirmation first. But wait, we're not done. I hope you remember me saying above that you can rename a file and its file extension, but that doesn't necessarily convert the file from one format to another. If seeing that a file has an executable file extension isn't enough of a hint that you should probably not open the file, or that ne'er-do-wells try to hide malware amongst a series of archived files, or as one larger compressed file, then it should come as no surprise that even a simple .doc or .ppt file can actually be hazardous. Let's look at what happens when you change a file name and its extension manually. It so happens there is a way to make it so that a .exe or other extension can be stripped from the file name so that our example file appears as salesreports.xls but still contains the malware. Let's return to our cute fluffy bunny. Notice that I have file extension viewing turned on, and that this is a .jpeg. I can click on the bunny and say rename using the right click. Rather than change the name of the file, let's simply change the file format to a .wav file. This should turn it into a sound file, but it's actually a picture. Notice how the computer prompts us saying, would we like to change the file extension? It might become unusable. We're going to say yes. The file has now been changed to a .wav file, but you can notice that the operating system is still detecting that it is a JPEG, and it's even showing an image icon. If I attempt to run this file, .wav has a file association so that it should open with Groove. Let's see what happens. Given that the rabbit is actually an image file, it's understandable that Groove cannot play this as music. These types of files are stored in different ways. But just the act of clicking on the rabbit is enough to launch the file, or any malware that lies underneath. With our public service announcement now ended, let's look at how to open a file with different programs, because sometimes you'd like to open a file but not with the default program, and don't wish to change your default associations. Let's start with Mac or Apple products. To open a file on your Mac using a different program, navigate to the file you wish to open and right-click on it to see the File menu. When the File menu opens, click on the Open With option as shown in the image below. This will open the Open With submenu, allowing you to choose from a list of other apps, or use Other to navigate and find a new one on your own. While we are here, I may as well mention to macOS users that if you want to change a default association, in your case a default app, other than a web browser or email client, here is how. Open up Finder, navigate to the file in question, and right-click to bring up a menu. Select Get Info, and then from the box that appears, you'll find about halfway down the heading Open With. Click this and you'll see the default app associated with this file type. Now click on the drop-down menu, select a new default, then click Choose All button. From now on, all files of that type will open with the default app you have selected. For PC users, the process for opening a file in a different program other than the default program is very similar. Open up a window to navigate to your file, right-click on the file, and click on Open With. It's usually halfway down the menu tree. Here you can likewise choose one of the different options given, or click on Choose Another App, and this will allow you to find and navigate to one yourself. Lastly, let's look at a few different lists of common file extensions and what they are used for. That way you can familiarize yourself with them. The following is a listing of the most common audio file extensions. Please keep in mind that there are several hundred file extensions for each different service type. I can't possibly list all of them here. You may notice that these are color-coded. Red signifies they are predominantly used in Apple or Mac OS systems. Blue means that they are prominently found on PC or Windows operating systems, whereas purple, they could be found in a mixture of the two. Feel free to pause the video now and review these at your own leisure. Now, here are some of the video file extensions. Now moving on to common image file extensions. Next up is a listing of workplace applications and text file extensions. Here we have a listing of compressed files or archive file extensions. Here are just a handful of the web and internet file extensions, just to give you a taste. Here is a short list of some disk image file extensions and email file extensions, two topics that are probably less well known and less talked about. We have already discussed and looked at some executable file extensions, but here's a list just because we didn't cover all of the common ones. I know, this is a lot to take in. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. I told you there were a lot of file extensions. Here are some settings and font file extensions. Just 2 more to go. Maybe you can spot some programming and source file extensions that you've seen before. Last up is a listing of other common Windows-based file extensions. If you spot these, try not to mess with them. Well, once again, that's all for me for today. Thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, please share it and pass it on. Hopefully, we will have more future tutorials covering a variety of different technological devices and topics made available. I'm Chris, and safe journeys.